This episode of the Reviving Vet Med podcast is brought to you by us. That's right. Reviving Vet Med is more than just the name on this podcast. Reviving Veterinary Medicine is a team of passionate veterinary professionals dedicated to helping you build a career that feels joyful, sustainable, and fulfilling. Whether you're navigating burnout, looking to boost team well-being, or just need tools to feel a little more human in your veterinary role, we're here for you. From one-on-one coaching and group debriefings to lunch and learns and a library of free evidence-based resources, everything we offer is grounded in compassion, knowledge, and real-life experience. Visit revivingvetmed.com to explore support that prioritizes your well-being, your growth, and your sense of belonging in this wonderful profession. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Reviving Vet Med. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the topics of neurodiversity and coaching in veterinary medicine with our guest, Helen Allwood. Helen is a small animal vet turned coach and trainer with 15 years of experience in the profession. After receiving a later in life ADHD diagnosis, she became an advocate for neurodiversity in the workplace and now supports veterinary professionals through leadership coaching, career transitions, and return to work journeys. Topics include the impact of a late ADHD diagnosis on identity and career, misconceptions about ADHD and autism in vet medicine, common struggles faced by neurodivergent professionals, and how leaders can create inclusive, safe environments. Helen also shares coaching strategies that empower neurodivergent team members and her perspective on what reviving veterinary medicine really means. So with that said, I'm excited to share this information with you today, so let's go ahead and get into the episode.
This is the Reviving Vet Med podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk. And my mission is to improve the mental health and well-being of veterinary professionals around the world.
Hi, Helen. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, I wonder if you can start by sharing a little bit about your veterinary journey, what your background is, and what inspired you to get into coaching.
Yeah, so I've done a little bit of everything, I think. So I was in mixed practice for a little while and really loved that. And then was in a very big and very busy charity hospital, small animal charity hospital for 12 years and went into leadership there and loved that, loved the ECC caseload and the owners and the team and everything about that was fab.
Amazing. I love that. So from there, how did you make the transition from practice to being a coach?
Somebody said to me, actually, think about in your job what doesn't feel like work. And for me, it was one-to-ones with my staff, with my team. And I just love talking to them and I love getting to know them. And I loved, kind of getting a bit deeper and spending that one-on-one time with them. So when I was thinking about diversifying from clinical practice, I thought about that and what did I really enjoy? And that was it for me. And so it was coaching really. And I got my ADHD diagnosis when I was off on maternity leave, actually crazy time. So that was all about the same time. I was thinking about diversifying after my third child. I got my ADHD diagnosis and those things kind of came together to kind of lay out the career path that I then followed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk a lot about your late life diagnosis of ADHD. I'm wondering how that impacted your professional identity and your sense of self, getting that new information.
Yeah, a lot. A lot, I think, is the answer. But not all at once. I mean, there was some immediate things. So there was some things that I realized immediately about myself. But in kind of true ADHD fashion, I went for the diagnosis very, very quickly. So I thought maybe I might have ADHD. And then in a fortnight, I had an appointment to see whether that was the case and then got the diagnosis. I really, really rushed into it. And I don't regret that. But I mean, it wouldn't be for everybody to do that. So yeah, it took a little while then to realize what that meant professionally and personally, like both really. So some things I realized straight away, but then a lot of things, it took a long time to figure out what traits I identified with, what I didn't identify with so much. And it was really ADHD coaching that helped me through that transition because there's loads of grief there as well. Like there's this huge amount of what if I'd have known this information sooner? Would it have changed things? Would I have acted any differently? Would I have been able to be a bit more compassionate to myself? Would I have asked for different things? So it's a big time, that kind of diagnosis.
Yeah, wow. It's so interesting. I have a few colleagues and friends and coaching clients as well who've also had this late life diagnosis or later in life. We're not late life, but we are adults receiving this diagnosis when many today are diagnosed as children. And it almost seems like there's this sense of relief. It's like, oh my gosh, like that makes sense. For all this time, I've thought there was something wrong with me and I just couldn't do these things. And now I recognize that this is just simply the way my brain works. I hadn't thought about it from the perspective of grief, where, yeah, like all of this lost time not knowing, how could that have looked differently for me? Yeah, what a great sentiment to share. I'm really curious as to how that diagnosis then led to your advocacy for neurodiversity awareness in vet med, because I know that this is a huge passion of yours. It's something that you've taught me a lot about. How has this formed for you over time since getting your diagnosis?
Yeah, that was an immediate thing. For some reason, and I still haven't really quite worked out why, as soon as I got the diagnosis, I really wanted to shout about it. I really wanted to tell my story. And that's partly why I'm here talking to you and doing coaching and everything, because I think that so many people must be out there, don't know this about themselves. And it's made such a positive difference to me that I really, really wanted to kind of shout about it. And it was almost an impulsive thing, oh my gosh, this is so great, mixed in with the grief stuff. But yeah, so I wanted to share my story. I really did, because I thought it would help other people that were in the situation that I was in.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of mixed emotions there, right? Like processing it, coming to terms with it, experiencing the grief, wanting to advocate. I can relate to that a little bit in my transition through burnout and just, when I finally had words to what I had gone through and how that intersected with my mental health challenges, such as depression and anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, like if I had known this information ahead of time, I probably would have made some different decisions and I would have done some things differently. And how many people could I help if they had this information that I have now? So I can really identify with that passion. I'm curious, you mentioned there's people out there that might not even know that they're living with ADHD. What do you think are some common misconceptions about ADHD and autism or, other neurodivergent conditions in vet medicine that you really feel passionate about challenging?
I think the main one is we are substandard vets or substandard colleagues or substandard people, because it's just not the case. And I don't want to blow my own trumpet because, who likes to do that? But like, I'm a good vet, and a lot of that is because of my ADHD, not despite it, not apart from it. I'm very driven. I empathize well with clients and get on well with other team members. I like details. I'm good at seeing patterns. I'm really interested in diagnostics. I'm really good in a crisis, because a lot of the time with ADHD, everything's a crisis. So, an emergency situation just as, the norm. And so that is it for me, like neurodivergent people, and we're great colleagues. We're really good at the job if we can support ourselves and support each other properly. And again, that's why I wanted to go into coaching, because that's it for me. Coaching is such great support if you're in the veterinary sector, and so, so, so necessary throughout that whole diagnostic process and throughout your working kind of life and figuring yourself out. That has been central to my support, and it's central to the kind of support that I'd like to give others as well.
I love that. I'm smiling and laughing because I mentioned that I have some close friends and colleagues who have been diagnosed with ADHD and or autism, and they are brilliant, brilliant individuals and veterinarians, like just tremendous creativity and problem solving skills, tremendous ability to stay focused during an emergency situation as an emergency and critical care specialist. I work with a lot of individuals in that space. I think perhaps they gravitate towards the emergency space because they feel, at home there within that more stressful setting for some other folks, yeah, gosh, I would never think to call somebody less than. And yet I can identify with that thought that there's something not typical about the way my brain works. And therefore, that must in some way impact my capacity as a vet. And I see the analogy there between mental health challenges and neurodivergence, where there's that sense of something different about me. And I hesitate to say different and therefore wrong or not normal. I'm putting that in air quotes. So I can see that. And I'm so glad that you're dispelling that myth, because I agree it couldn't be further from the truth. You mentioned, and you have mentioned a few times, this, benefit of coaching. And I know you really experienced positive results from that when you did coaching. And I have no doubt you've seen that within your one-on-one clients as well. What do you see as the biggest challenges that individuals with ADHD experience when they come to you for coaching?
Yeah, lots of different things. Mental health challenges is a huge one. And obviously, mental health challenges can go for various reasons hand in hand with neurodivergence. And I think there's a lot of overlap there, in what I talk about, because there's a lot of reasons where if you might feel other, if you're neurodivergent, if you might feel different, that would erode your self-esteem and can cause some real mental health challenges. And anxiety is a big one for neurodivergent people as well. So I talk to my clients a lot about mental health challenges and how we can stabilize ourselves. I think a lot. You talked before about putting a name to something. And a lot of it is that. One of the things that we struggle with sometimes as neurodivergent individuals is naming our feelings. Interoception, actually having a name for your feelings can really help you process that, and work through that. So a lot of mental health stuff, we talk about switching off at the end of the day a lot, communication skills, loads. We talk about that a lot. And sometimes as well, what I do is to speak with people's line managers as well, with them present. So do like a 3-way meeting, which can be really useful and really nice as well, to kind of almost help them communicate with their line manager with me there. So that can be really useful. And yeah, things like executive function things like time management, all of those things that we can strategize around when we have a bit of time and headspace that we get in coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. I often chuckle because I think the executive functioning skills are something that everyone can benefit from, not just individuals with ADHD. But yeah, it does seem, when I connect with my coaching clients who have ADHD, that there really can be these challenges around planning out their day and staying on task and not getting into this switching tasks or hyper focusing on certain tasks. And then this time blindness that happens is where it's like, oh my gosh, I ended up getting sucked into this thing for 2 hours when I needed to be doing something else. So I know that there's lots of different strategies there and ways to help. Speaking of which, what do you find are some helpful strategies? I know there's lots out there. Obviously, you mentioned even just, this self-awareness, this name it to tame it, as we say, where we can get really more in touch with our feelings and be able to name those, have an awareness, process it, and move on. What other strategies have you found to be helpful with some of your ADHD coaching clients?
There's loads of different ones, and I'm a little bit reluctant to kind of name them, because what I really do is kind of feed in things like the Pomodoro technique and that sort of thing, with timers. But it's very, very rare that I say to a coaching client, here's this strategy, go and use it. It's absolutely about co-creating what's going to work for them in their life. And this is why coaching is such a sort of interactive, dynamic, back into sort of process, because I can tell you what I think is going to help you, but you are the expert on your own life. Like, I have not got all the information, but you have. And if I make a suggestion of a strategy, then we need to figure out how that's going to work for you. And actually, a lot of the time I make a suggestion of a strategy, and where we end up is a completely different place. Co-created some brilliant solutions with people. And this is what I mean. ND people have these amazing creative brains. And lying on the floor with my cat in the dark was one strategy that we had, for someone to help them switch off after work. One of my clients created the most amazing set of stickers to put in her diary to make sure she built everything out properly. There's no way I could have said, this is what I think you need to do, with that, it's about feeding my knowledge in of what the strategies could be and feeding their experience of how their brain works, what's going on in their life and everything else, and really coming together to create those bespoke strategies.
I love that. Yeah, I know you and I have connected about your approach to coaching before, where you spend a lot of time with the individual identifying first and foremost what their strengths are, right? Like these are your superpowers, essentially. This is what makes you great and skillful and, so competent as a veterinarian and as a human. And then here are the places where you're maybe feeling stuck or challenged. And so knowing what you know and what's worked for you, you might make some suggestions, or I won't even call them suggestions. That seems a bit strong, but here's some things that have worked for individuals in your situation before. Which of those resonate and how might we make them uniquely beneficial for you? So I love that. Switching gears a little bit from the individual to the leaders, what are some ways that veterinary workplaces can unintentionally exclude or even overlook neurodivergent team members? And I know you mentioned working a lot in conjunction with the supervisors or the leaders in the practice and your clients. What have those conversations highlighted for you in terms of some challenges there?
I think it starts at interview, actually. A lot of our interviews now can be quite formulaic, I think. When I first went for my mixed practice job, it was a chat and that was great. When I went for my most recent leadership role, it was very points-based questions, which is great in a lot of ways and very useful. But as a neurodivergent person, sometimes our processing speeds can be different. And something as simple as having the questions in advance for an interview can be, massive. It can be the difference between you seeing what I can do in the job and me freezing up and being able to say nothing. So things like that. And there's quite a lot of resistance often to those kind of adjustments. A lot of leaders say that's not fair. Why should I do that? And I would say, why not do it to everyone? Why not do it for everybody? Like, it's a really useful thing. Why shouldn't we all have some time to think about those things in advance? So from that point onwards, I think sometimes it's difficult for leaders. It's difficult because as a leader, you often get thrown in to this sort of accidental leadership type of role. And, I was a leader. I had no idea what to do with neurodivergent people. And I had no idea. I couldn't even define neurodiversity at that point. There's so much to do as a new veterinary leader that, if somebody comes along to you and says, well, also you need to cater for different brains, I think that's really hard to take. So again, I think that's where I come in to help leaders with that. And there's got to be loads of compassion behind that. There's got to be, because veterinary leaders are 99.999% of the time trying their absolute hardest. We need to collaborate, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. You touched on the adjustments that can be made for individuals. And I think we often use the word, at least here in North America, we talk about accommodations. And it almost feels like this swear word, in the workplace. And I do a lot of leadership training myself around communication. And so there's this inevitable pushback that I get that is, well, what about everybody else when they see these accommodations and then they question, well, why do they get to work in this part of the hospital by themselves? And why do they not have to see XYZ appointments anymore? And all of these things. And I do think we need a little bit of a mindset shift there. First of all, a knowledge and awareness of what neurodiversity is and how our brains all function differently and how we want to support each other so that we can function to our best ability. And also recognizing it as less so of accommodations and more so of just helping everybody function as their best human self, right? For neurotypical and neuroatypical individuals, right? Like we all need things to flourish. So let's embrace that, be open to that, and not look at it as though someone is having some sort of unfair advantage or unfair getting off the hook with certain types of work or whatever it might be. I think, like you said, there is so much that still remains to be learned in this space. And so with that increased awareness, I think we'll have better empathy and understanding. And if we can maybe change some of the language around how we're supporting people in the workplace, that perhaps that would help as well. Along those same lines, I'm wondering how you help leaders in veterinary practices create environments that are neurodiversity inclusive, right? Inclusive to the fact that everyone's brains work differently. And I think with that comes a little bit of psychological safety, like the safety for people to speak up and say, hey, I can't work with the radio on really loud throughout the hospital, or, I can't type up my records in the treatment room when the dental equipment is whirring away. What advice do you have for them?
For me, and this is what I provide as well with my little company, the Vet Project. So we provide CE, as you call it over there, or CPD, neurodiversity training for leaders, because it's so important that people know about it. As I say, I didn't know about it as a leader. I didn't know anything about it. And what we find is training and awareness brings compassion. Always, always. If you don't know, how can you possibly understand? And if you understand, then you can be compassionate about whatever it is. So, yeah, it's about making leaders think. And that individual kind of that you were talking about there in terms of not having everybody doing the same thing, I think that's so important. Fairness, what's that? What is it fair that we all have to do the same thing all the time? Is that fair? Or actually, is that not fair? Is it, if I'm great at ECC work and I hate vaccinations, why not? I do more ECC work and my colleague who likes vaccinations does a bit more of that, and then when I have to do some vaccinations, I'm going to be much happier about that. It's rethinking what fairness is, what equality is, what equity is, and actually redefining that. That's what training is for me.
I love that. It's beautifully said. I know that in addition to coaching leaders, you also coach individuals with return to work transitions and career changes. What do you find that those clients need most with coaching?
A lot of it, again, is about self-discovery. I think so much of coaching is about self-discovery. A lot of the time, I don't think, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, that we have to spend any time getting to know ourselves and what our values are and what we want and what we need. And when you're thinking about transitions or return to work or new leadership, you really need to know what you're about and what your values are and where you sit on certain things. So although those things sound like they might be quite different areas of coaching, we often come back to those sort of similar themes of actually, who am I and what do I want and what do I need? And how is this going to affect my next steps tomorrow and next week and next year?
Yeah, I love that. You also, I know, have postgraduate training in business. And I'm wondering how that has also shaped the way that you support your clients as well.
Yeah, so this is a certificate that I'm doing in business and personal coaching, which is kind of in addition to all the other coaching qualifications I did. So it's about being evidence-based. So at the moment I'm writing essays, I'm really reading a lot of papers about coaching. And I think as veterinary professionals, we love evidence-based stuff, don't we? It can't be too, woo-woo. So that really helps me reading lots of papers and being able to summarize those and taking the evidence behind coaching and then transferring that into my sessions.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. I speak a lot on mindfulness and it's far too woo-woo without the evidence. And thankfully, a lot of these fields where, 10, 15 years ago, there was really no good solid evidence to support them today. Now we do have relatively well-structured research studies demonstrating the benefits of mindfulness, meditation, coaching, etc. So I love that you're taking steps to learn more about that and then be able to integrate that evidence into your supports. What advice would you give to somebody who thinks that they might be neurodivergent and feels unsure about pursuing an assessment or a diagnosis? I know for you, you latched onto it really quickly. You were like, yes, I'm all in. I have connected with some individuals that have a sense that this could be true for them. And yet there is hesitation there. And certainly in some circumstances, there's also the challenge with not having access to services. I know that this can be a huge challenge in the US, for example, where they don't have as ready access or there's long wait lists, even here in Canada sometimes to get that diagnosis. But what would you say now being on the other side of this to somebody who really wants to or is considering digging deep in here?
I would say talk to somebody. Don't try and do it alone. if you can find a neurodiversity affirming friend or colleague or somebody that knows a bit about this stuff, try and talk to them about it, because it's such a big thing. It's not something that I think you should try and do alone. It's a lot, and we need to have support. Or email me, do you know? I've been through it. I know what it's like. And sometimes that person isn't always obvious. If you don't have that person, then it might be that you need to reach out a little bit wider to find who that is.
Yeah, that is the beauty of having individuals like you who have been through this and now are on the other side and are offering coaching to individuals. So what I'm hearing you say is that if an individual hasn't received a formal diagnosis, they can still reach out to you and connect with you, and you can help, guide them through what that looks like and support them along the way, which I think is absolutely incredible. A couple more questions. One, I'm personally curious about. I know you talked about this aspect of grief earlier in our conversation, and gosh, how might things have been different if I had had this information years ago? What do you think, if anything, you would have done differently or could have done differently had you had this information? For example, when you started vet school or when you were early in your career?
I would have just been nicer to myself. One of the things that I really struggled with, especially in vet school, was rote learning. So things like anatomy, I failed the first anatomy exam because I just didn't know how to do it. And I think if I'd known that my brain wasn't set up to learn in that way, I would have been kinder to myself and tried to find a way around it. So now I know that actually, if I need to learn anatomy, I need to look at a surgery case or something like that. There's got to be a reason. I've got to pin it to something. I can't learn, muscles just for the sake of it. There needs to be, I need to understand. And so, yeah, I think I would have been nice to myself and I would have been better because I would have looked for different ways to do things.
Yeah. Wow. What a great story. I can very much relate to the challenges with anatomy. It was my worst class in first year. I remember I barely passed my first exam. I think 58% was my score. And I was devastated. I'd never had a score so low. And I remember seeing everybody just like in the library with their skeletons and their coloring books and all of these things and memorizing and memorizing, memorizing. And I was like, my brain doesn't work that way either. Like, I can't just sit there and memorize. And, then fast forward when we get to pathology, where there's application of anatomy to disease. And I was like, wow, like it was then I finally got it. It was so much more relevant and it's just so much easier to recall because there was that application. So I am definitely a problem-based learner as well. So I can definitely relate. But I love that you touched on self-compassion because I think, there's this quote, I think it comes from Gretchen Rubin, where she says, when we know ourselves better, we can ask more of ourselves. I'm probably butchering the quote, but essentially, like when we know what our strengths and our challenges are, then we know what we are just innately good at and where we need more support. And in those places where we need more support, we can have compassion, recognizing that's not a strength for me, or that's just not how my brain works. You know what I mean? And, the research is so clear that self-compassion, while it seems counterintuitive to most of us type A individuals, is much better in terms of resilience. We can bounce back much faster from challenges when we can be kind to ourselves and just embrace the situation and move on. So I love that. My one last question for you, Helen, before we say goodbye is, what does reviving veterinary medicine mean to you?
So it's about community for me and collaboration. And I think the fact that we've got 6, including you, of us coaches, all specializing in different areas and having different niches, we've got everything covered really, haven't we? I think, at any stage of life or anywhere you are, there's something that you can dip into. And that isn't possible, as one person. As a coach, you can't be everything to anybody, but as a team, you can be a lot of things to a lot of people. And that feeds into, how we'd like to set up veterinary teams. We've all got our strengths, haven't we? And we've all got our challenges. And I think as a collaborative community, we're all working to our strengths, which is lovely.
I love that. Well, Helen, it's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you today. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about your journey and how you support individuals in our profession. And I'm so excited for people to connect with you. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks.
So that's it for this episode of Reviving Vet Med. I hope you took away some tips for supporting neurodivergent individuals in veterinary practice, whether you're a leader, colleague, or someone navigating your own neurodivergent identity. If you do one thing after listening to this episode, I hope that it's to forward it to a colleague or coworker who you think would benefit from hearing Helen's insights and experiences. As well, we would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast so that you're sure to get the new episodes as soon as they drop. If you're interested in connecting with Helen for a 20-minute free introductory Zoom call, please check out the show notes or visit revivingvetmed.com/coaching. You can also follow us on social media at Reviving Vet Med for more tips and strategies for well-being in vet medicine. And if you have questions about today's episode, suggestions for future topics, or inquiries about sponsorship, please email us at podcast@revivingvetmed.com. I'd like to thank the team at Podcast Prime Solutions for producing this episode, and I'd also like to thank you for listening. I hope you'll tune in next time. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Bye for now.